Hello everyone, my name is Shreyans Kumar Sharma and you are welcome to this advanced guide of Git and version control. So before we start, it is going to be an advanced guide, so you need to be well versed with the basic concepts of Git and version control. You should already know about all those things. Now what we will learn, so we will learn about some Git concepts like Git Stash, Git Bisect, Git Rep Log, Git Diff, Git Switch, Git Rebase, Git Cherry Pick, and also some basic Git commands which come along the way. So now let's get started. So now let's look at Git Stash. Git Stash helps you to save your work without committing it. So let's say you are writing a novel and you wrote chapter 1, then committed it, then chapter 2, and then committed it, and then you started working on chapter 4. You forget to write chapter 3. So you want chapter 3 to be a part of your main branch and also retrieve the work you have done in chapter 4. If you just do Git Checkout, then all your work from chapter 4 will be lost. You don't want that. So let's see this how it works in practice. So basically it helps to save all the work you have already done in chapter 4 without committing it. So let's see. So open up your terminal and get into your working directory. So in my working directory I have already made chapter 1 and chapter 2 and committed it. So as you can see, chapter 1 is done and chapter 2 is also done, committed. Then let's say I created a chapter 4 file and let's say I started working on it. I did some work and then let's say I staged the work. So I added chapter 4 into my staging area. Now I realized that I haven't written chapter 3, so I want to save the work I have done in chapter 4. So that could be done by using Git Stash. So you write Git Stash and hit enter, and then your chapter 4 work will be saved. And now if you see your working directory, then chapter 4 is not present because it was uncommitted, so it was removed, and but the work was saved. Now let's say you want to write chapter 3, which you have missed. So you did chapter 3 and you completed it. Then you want to work on chapter 4. You have kept it half done previously, and you want to retrieve that half done work and build upon that. So here comes Git Stash apply, which helps you do this. If you just hit Git Stash list, then it lists down all the work you have previously stashed. So I have stashed only one, so it is saying stash @0. If you have stashed, let's say 3 work, then stash @1 and stash @2 will be also visible here. But since I have stashed only one, so it is. And then you have to write the command Git Stash apply and which work you want to retrieve. Now you do this, and after doing this, it adds your chapter 4 file to your staging area. But we want to modify it also, so let's first modify chapter 4 file. So it was half done, so now it is complete. And now let's add all our files to the staging area and then commit it. now when you see your Git log, and you will see that chapter 1 was done, chapter 2 was done, and then chapter 3 and 4 was also done. So it helps you do this. There are many other use cases also of Git Stash. Let's see them. So all these are various use cases of Git Stash. They are very helpful. You could read it from the slides. And now let's move to Git Diff. Let's talk about Git Diff. So if you want to know the difference between two commits, like what are the changes you made, then you could use Git Diff. Let's see this in practice. So in the last example we have already created chapter 3 and chapter 4. Now let's edit our chapter 4. So let's say write edit 1 chapter 4 and save it. And now let's say you want to know the difference between this chapter 4 which you have modified and the previous chapter 4. So you could write git diff, and here it shows that in the previous one has this line chapter 4 and the new one has this line edit 1 chapter 4. So now let's talk about Git Switch. And switching branches is what is Git all about. So it is at the very heart of Git. So Git Switch helps in just switching branches. So that's it. And you want to know the difference between Git Checkout and Git Switch, because Git Checkout is also used for switching branches. So what's the exact difference? So Git Checkout is a very versatile command. So it is used for many purposes, and one of those purposes is switching branches. So it led to a lot of confusion among the developers. So that's why Git Switch was introduced, whose sole purpose was to switch branches. So now let's talk about Git Rebase. So let's say you have created a master branch, and then you have created an experimental branch. Let's say you were writing chapter 3 and it was experimental. You don't want it to add in your master branch directly. So here I have created chapter 1, chapter 2 and chapter 2 edit 1. Then in the experimental branch chapter 2, chapter 3 and chapter 3 edit 1. Now when we use Git Rebase, so right now we are in our experimental branch and we write Git Rebase master. So that changes the base from chapter 2. Right now the base is chapter 2. What is exactly a base? So base is the common point between two branches. So here it is chapter 2. Now it is rebased. So when you call git rebase master, it rebases the chapter 2 to the latest edit, to the latest commit of that branch. The latest commit of the master branch is chapter 2 edit 1. So now that becomes the base, and after rebasing, the master branch is chapter 1, chapter 2 and then chapter 2 edit 1, whereas the experimental branch is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 2 edit 1, chapter 3 and then chapter 3 edit 1. So it goes like that. Now if you call git rebase from the master branch, that you are in your master branch and you call git rebase experimental branch, then something else happens. So here you have the base as chapter 2 and it is rebased, and our experimental branch is being rebased. So the base changes to the latest commit of experimental branch, which is chapter 3 edit 1. So now the master branch looks like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 edit 1 and then chapter 2 edit 1. It looks like that, and the experimental branch remains the same, that is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 and chapter 3 edit 1. Now let's see this in practice. So I have already created that structure which I have shown in the example. So as you can see, this is our master branch. So here we have chapter 1, chapter 2 and then chapter 2 edited chapter 2. And if we would switch to our experimental branch, so and see what it looks like, then it is like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 and chapter 3 edited chapter 3. So right now that is the case. Now if I call from the git rebase master from the experimental branch, so I call git rebase master, then you can now see the git log as chapter 1, chapter 2 and then this is introduced new thing, that is edited chapter 2 and then complete chapter 3 and then edited chapter 3. That's what I have shown in the slides. So I have called git rebase from the so that's what I have shown in the slide. I have called git rebase from the experimental branch. So when we call git rebase from the experimental branch, then the base, that was chapter 2, was shifted to chapter 2 chapter 2 edit 1, and that's what we see. Now the experimental branch is ch1, ch2, ch2e1, ch3 and this ch3e1. That's what we have just seen. That's what we see. Now let's see git cherry pick. So you have your master branch and you have your experimental branch. Now you want to add a particular commit, not necessarily the latest commit of experimental branch, to your master branch. Let's say here I want chapter 3 unedited version to be a part of my master branch, then git cherry pick is very useful. Let's see this. So now let's see git cherry pick in practice. So here I have already created the structure shown in the slide, which is like chapter 1, chapter 2 and edited chapter 2 in the master branch. And if we switch branches, then you could see this one is the experimental branch. So here we have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 and edited chapter 3. Now let's say I want this complete chapter 3, this commit to be a part of my master branch. So you have to copy this hash ID of this commit, and then let's switch to back to our master branch, and then just write git cherry pick and paste the hash ID, and now it has added to your actually that was a typo, so you have to write git cherry pick. So now it has been added to your master branch. If you want to see, then we have here our master branch, and this complete chapter 3, this commit has been added to our master branch. Now let's look at Git Rep Log. We have already seen Git Log. Git Log tells you about all the commits you have made in a particular branch. If you type Git Log, then it will tell you all your history of commits. Git Rep Log is like the big brother of Git Log. It tells you about all your history of all the branches, of all your commits, and also the merging actions or switching actions. Every type of action that you have made in your working directory, it tells you about that. Let's see this in practice. So here let's say this one is the cherry pick example. So in the last example, so I write git rep log, So as you can see, it gives me everything, all the details of all what I have done with this directory. So now let's talk about Git Bisect. So basically Git Bisect is a way of hunting down a bad commit that you have made, because of which you are facing problems right now. So it uses bisection search to find the bad commit, and now let's see this in practice. So here I have written a story, and as you can see, it has many lines. I have committed a lot of lines over here. Let's run it and see once again. So write line 2, line 3 and all those commits that I have made. Now I want to now if you want to see the story, then so here is the story, as you could see, and here we can see that something is misprinted, like this line is not the part of the story, and it has crept in due to some bad commit that I have made in the process. Now I want Git to find this bad commit. Okay, so for that let's start Git Bisect. So when we type Git Bisect start, it basically starts the process. Then we have to give it a good commit. A good commit is something before a good commit is basically that commit which doesn't has that bug. So it could be the starting commit, the very easy point, the first commit which you have made. So here this line 2 commit, I am taking it as the good commit. So I have to write git bisect good, and I paste this hash ID, because when we were at line 2 there was no problem with the story. The problem was introduced later on. And now I write git bisect, then we have to get rid a bad commit, like when the problem has already done, the problem has already arisen. And if you do not write the hash ID of of the bad commit, it takes the current commit as the bad commit, and then it basically helps you see, it gets you this hash ID, and it wants you to check whether this was creating a problem or not. We have to give it a constant feedback whether this ID was creating a problem or not. So we want to run this version. So we check out to this, and we open our text chapter. So as we can see that we are on the that the bug is still showing, that it is still present. So we have to give it the feedback git bisect bad, and then it gives us this ID to check whether this is good or bad. So now we check out to this, and we open our text. So it is still a bad one. So we give it the feedback. And now it gives us that right line 3 is the bad comment, which was made by this author, which is basically me, and at this timestamp, and basically this was the bad comment. And we could also see that line 3 was the bad comment.